Good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Neil Parekh, and I am the executive producer for Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We are live. It's a little early, depending on where you live with daylight savings time, but want to thank everyone for joining us. In particular, want to thank everyone who's watching this show on replay. If you're going either to Facebook or LinkedIn, or even YouTube. Thank you for taking the time to watch the show. Please hit share. Please leave comments, even if you're watching the recording. We have a great show for you today. Our guest is Ti-Hua Chang, an investigative journalist based in New York. I actually grew up, I remember watching him when I lived in New York many years ago on NBC, but he's actually worked on almost all of the local stations. So we'll hear a bit about his background and his story. He's won several awards and also does jujitsu and did a story slam for Aja as well. So we're excited to have him join us. I think almost almost on a streak, and we'll have to start keeping track of this. Jonathan Borstein is joining us from south of Union Square. Almost the first person to join us every week. Thank you, Jonathan. Vincent D'Souza is joining us from Chennai, India. And thank you for keeping up with the time change, Vincent. Appreciate that. Nicholas Chen as well from Taipei. And Diane Stefani joining us from Margate, New Jersey. So with that, I'm going to bring in Sree Srinivasan, who is the host of our show. And let's get the show going. Sree, how are you today?
Hi, Neil. How are you?
Great,
Great to see you. Yankee hat and everything.
Yankee hat and all for daylight savings time.
Yeah, exactly. Happy daylight savings time. I'm wearing my Fareed Zakaria shirt here, and the GPS show I know is on later today, and I hope a lot of our folks watch that. But this is the poor man's television show. We put this together with lots of love from Neil, Paula, and Steve, all over the country. Paula is in Tallahassee, Steve is out in Philly, and Neil's in suburban DC. Thank you all for doing this for us. It's an amazing labor of love from all of us, and so thank you.
And we have as you mentioned, our great production team. You can follow us on social media on most channels. I'm at Neil Parekh. Paula Kiger is at Big Green Pen, and Steve Taylor is at Steve Derive or Derive. I'm never sure how to pronounce that, Steve, but we'll work on that. Derive. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a
by
great
the way,
team.
Just got an alert. It says Kamala Harris just endorsed Joe Biden.
Oh wow! Right over the phone.
Yeah,
breaking
exactly.
News.
Yeah, breaking news. So I'm just delighted that folks can join us. This is a very busy news week and so much going on around the world. I just returned from a trip to Miami, and certainly the flight back was, I would say, 3/4 full. The airport was maybe 3/4 as busy as it normally is, and lots of nervousness. We'll be talking coronavirus and so many other topics, and we want you to tag your friends right now or hit share on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And for those who haven't been here in a while, this is our 5th year that we're starting of doing this. And thanks to Neil and company, we're now live on LinkedIn as well. And we're archived on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. So you can find the entire collection of our shows there.
And of course, we're building up our YouTube. Sorry to interrupt. We're building up our YouTube presence, Sree.
Yeah, it's great. And please tell us where you're watching from. Our guest is already listening to see where people are around the world, and it's so cool. He shared it already. I hope you will as well. So let's get started. I know, Neil, you've had a very busy week at work.
Yes, it's been very busy, and one of the things that we're focusing on. It's throwing a lot of things up in the air in terms of the coronavirus plans, meetings. We have a couple of conferences coming up. We're trying to. I work at United Way for folks who don't know, and we have 1,800 United Ways around the world. and 13,000 staff. So one of our job is to keep people updated and briefed in terms of what's going on, how it's going to impact their lives. One thing we should talk about, Sree, before we introduce our guest, is Social Media Weekend, which is scheduled for March 21st. Do you want to speak a little bit about that in terms of what our thinking is right now?
Sure, and you're an integral part of that, Neil. I want to thank you and all our speakers and guests from around the world who are participating. This is my flagship event, but like everything else, we are paying very close attention to what we do with the conference, and we have a meeting and a conversation with our hosts at Pace University and our sponsors, Muckrack, which are hosting the Friday night party, and then Pace is hosting the Saturday conference. So we will have more information starting on Monday evening and Tuesday. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Well, thank you. So with that, why don't you bring on our guest, and I will rejoin the show at the end to wrap up and talk about next week's guest.
Yeah, and we are in a very special new location because this is not my apartment.
Right?
Most of you who have seen it before, this is a different place. So thanks, Neil, and we'll see you
Okay.
soon. All
Thank
right.
you.
And good morning from Winnipeg to Sky. And let me bring in our guest. There he is, Ti-Hua Chang. How are you, Ti-Hua?
Hi, Sree. Good to see you.
And great to see you. This is an amazing friend and mentor for so many of us in journalism, and especially those of us who've done broadcast journalism. Ti-Hua is I'm going to use a word he doesn't like, a legendary figure in American broadcasting, a pioneer in so many ways, and an investigative journalist who has worked in many of the most important news outlets and broken so many important stories. He's on Facebook, Ti-Hua.Chang. On Twitter, he's Ti-Hua Chang. In IG, he's Ti-Hua_Chang. And on LinkedIn, you can find him there very easily. So please do follow Ti-Hua, and please hit share right now so that you can join this very important conversation. We are in downtown Manhattan, and I'm just delighted to be here, Ti-Hua. Thank you for all you've done for so many of us as journalists, but also for your viewers who have watched you for how many years on New York television?
New York television, let's see, it would be like 20 something,
20,
30.
Yeah, 30 years.
I haven't been on TV in New York for several years now.
Yeah, but people all know you, and I know when you are in any public gathering, people all come up and say hi and say thank you for your stories, and so we just want to note all you've done for us. So thank you for joining us. We have people joining, and Kevin McKenna, your 77 classmate, says hi.
Oh,
Kevin is deputy business editor at the New York Times.
He's watching?
Yes, he's watching right now.
Oh, because of the New York Times.
Yeah. And he was one of our first guests from the New York Times. We've had amazing New York Times guests, including recently we went to the home of the travel editor, Amy Vershup, to do this. But Kevin, thank you for watching, and thank you for support of all our online shenanigans. What's in the back there? Ti-Hua, what are we looking at in the back? What are those?
When I first got married, I had all my awards in the closet in the boxes, and then my wife took them out. And then recently, I've been working as a consultant for some Democratic candidates for Congress, for City Council, and also for the New York State Assembly. And I thought if I put a couple of my awards out, then they'll respect me more. So,
and there you are. So those are Emmy Awards. I bet, one second, I'm just going to go over here. Come on, tell us what they are, because okay. I bet you there are folks who have never seen one up close.
Okay. So,
but just before we do that, folks, we're going to come back and talk about all of this. That's why we're here, but we're going to come back in a minute. Ti-Hua is going to just introduce us to these awards.
Peabody.
The very prestigious Peabody Award. This is given back in '96 for Passport to Kill. He'll tell us about this story. Look how solid this award is.
And this is Murrow. And
the Edward R. Murrow Prize, the
AAJA. I have about 60 more in the closet.
60 more. So this is what an Emmy Award looks like. And
this is the new one.
This is the newer
one. I made sure I got another one recently, then I stopped. They did the New York Academy did something on Charlie Charlie Chan, the detective.
Yeah.
And I complained about it, and they
Uh-huh.
wouldn't do anything. So I stopped applying to the Emmys after that.
Oh my God.
I figured 5 is enough.
5 is enough. Diane says Ti-Hua will always be one of my favorite broadcast journalists.
Oh,
And she's watching from Margate. And we have Lote's watching from Bhutan in the Himalayas.
By the way, everyone watching now, you'll be able to watch me soon, because should I make the announcement now?
Yeah, are you ready?
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Well, so build up a little bit of build up. Okay, no, go
Little
ahead.
build up. I'm going to be on the largest online news organization in the world, and I will tell you which one in 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. Very exciting. All right.
And the job is very interesting. It's actually something I'm quite proud of, in the sense that I feel like I'll be able to do something for my children and future grandchildren. And that is, I will be the climate change investigative reporter.
Ooh.
Which is such an important position when you think about it.
Yes.
And but anyway, it's called tytinvestigates.com, which is the Young Turks. If you've heard of them, it's the largest online news organization. I'm very proud to be joining, but more importantly, it's such an important issue for all of us to address. And the fact that they crowdfunded a position so I could get a job, but also not for me, but just to crowdfund that position of an investigative reporter on climate change, to go after the people who are the deniers, and also to support the people and say, here are the facts. And I think that's critically important. It's very smart on the part of the Young Turks.
Yeah, great. So congratulations, and we look forward to seeing your work. Neil is showing a screenshot of what's going on the website right now, so people can take a look and get a sense of it.
The Young Turks?
Yeah, the Young Turks. He's doing that.
They're very, very efficient.
Yeah, this is a platform called StreamYard, which allows us to do all these cool things. And he's got various stories that they have done, and they're showing them all right now, so people can take a look. So,
by the way, have they ever seen your electronic setup?
No, it's a very.
They've never seen that, right? Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'm very impressed by your equipment.
Oh, thank you. It's so small and so.
Funny,
yeah, it does. It does. It does.
Your technological setup.
Thank you. I want us to bring up a couple of the comments that were there about Neil, including our friend Stefan posted a beautiful comment about Ti-Hua, and it says he says, "Good morning, Sree and Ti-Hua and New York Times Read Along family. Ti-Hua, you will always bring back so many memories from this born and bred New Yorker." And this is to be an iconic journalist in New York at a time when there's so much noise around journalism and enemies of the press and things like that, that even our president says. I think we have seen the value of facts and media and journalism now more than ever in the last few months. And today, in the world of the coronavirus, how important it is to get things right.
That's most critically important. We're seeing a really concrete example of what happens when you have an anti-intellectual, anti-science president who reportedly doesn't even read his briefings and gets all his information from Fox News. I mean, I'm not saying don't watch Fox News, but I think, everyone should watch all kinds of news organizations, but to only get it from one source and not read your briefing papers, to me, is like, it will show up. I mean, being anti-intellectual, which I think he is, and anti-science, is really something that's a terrible, terrible thing for the world, and especially for the United States of America.
Renata says, one of my favorites, watching you. And Melanie says hello. And I forgot to tag our friends at the Asian American Journalists Association. But folks, if you are watching and you have friends in the association, please share it with them as well so that they can join us. So let's talk a little bit about the news and see all that's going on. We usually talk about the New York Times, but I wanted to start with just this cover and get Ti-Hua's reaction to it. He's a subscriber too of the print magazine of the New Yorker. Yes. And what does this say to you? I mean, you already sort of alluded to it just a second ago, but what does this say to you? I love this cover, by the way.
Well, obviously it's a face mask, but covering his eyes because he's not seeing the reality of what's going on. And the point is, I think we'll see a direct result of this. I mean, the other day he went to the CDC and was bragging about how smart he is. And the CDC director, I think it was the director, said, praised him like it was Kim Jong-un or somebody going to, our great leader, Donald Trump, which I think if you read, a lot of people are saying who used to work for Donald Trump are saying that you really have to essentially suck up to him and talk about how wonderful he is because of his ego. And that just, honestly, after Barack Obama being this, cool, dispassionate, very calm, what I consider to be a very good president, a centrist president, but a very good president, then to have somebody brag about he's an expert in everything, and then have the director not talk about coronavirus, but talk about thank you for your wonderful decisions. The decisions have not been all that great so far, and we don't have enough coronavirus testing kits, and so that's a real problem. And then you put Vice President Mike Pence in charge, and I don't have a particular problem, except his previous history dealing with science was not really done well. He would not allow the distribution of clean needles to prevent the spread of HIV, and only after he realized it spread so much that he allowed it to happen. But so the decisions have not been that great. So you've got to, please wake up. Otherwise, literally millions of people could die here as well. And so, at least thousands, and hopefully not millions, but that's something that's very important.
And we really don't know where all this could go. It could be really, really bad. One of my friends posted a tweet in response to my photo of arriving back in New York City, and he said he's afraid that we might look back at the early days of March as the good old days if things go really south in terms of public gatherings, able to take your kids out, all of that. And so we should be worried, and it doesn't help to have a president who is thinking in the way he does. And Neil has just brought up the New Yorker's digital website right now to show us some of the stories there. And the cartoon cover is by Brian Stoffers. This cover is called, Brian Stoffers, the artist, it's called Under Control. That's the name of the cartoon.
Let me add something. When I was in college, I graduated a biology degree from UPenn. I was a genetics major. And one of the things in statistical genetics, and one of the things that I was thinking yesterday, in fact, was that I think what's going to happen, and I'm not a great expert, obviously, but having studied genetics, we may be seeing that every decade, or it may not be every decade anymore, it may actually increase. We're going to see each time a more virulent strain of some kind of virus. We had the SARS, and we had H1N1, which started here in the United States, by the way. And now we have the coronavirus, or novel coronavirus. I think what's going to happen is that we will start seeing more virulent strains of the viruses every few years, or certainly every decade, but even perhaps every few years. And that's something the whole world has to be able to deal with, because we're very interconnected now because of, obviously airplanes. Somebody in one day can be in Wuhan, China, and the next day will be in New York City, and then spread the viruses so easily. I've heard one infectious disease specialist said that you can be infected within 6 feet of a person who has coronavirus. And by the way, as an Asian who's afraid to cough now in the subway, so I don't want to scare everybody, if you're in the New York City area, the person who has coronavirus is most likely white, not Asian.
Important point. And I want to talk in a little bit. We'll come back to talking about what the effect has been on Chinatown, and that horrific video of some woman just lysoling a guy or man, whoever. That just the fact that happened on the New York City subway talks about all kinds of historical tropes and misinformation about East Asians and Asian community and all of that. And so
my son who's in high school said, one of his high school friends, by the way, do I look at you or do I look at
No, you're looking at us. It's both works. Yeah, both work. Yeah.
Okay, so
folks, we're in the presence of a guy who really knows his television, so he's asking all the right questions.
You have to know where to look. All those people will go, why is he not looking?
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing is that I think it's important to
your son,
his classmate, who's a 15-year-old Asian American girl who is East Asian, was in the subway, and she had a mask on, which actually protects other people. It doesn't protect you that much unless it's a very special mask, but it does protect other people and from getting the droplets from your breath. And he said that a grown man looked at her, and this is a young girl, and he looked at her and said, effing Chinese.
Oh.
And it's just like, and that's commonplace to hear that. And in reality, that kind of ignorance, I mean, she's protecting you, you idiot, not the other way around. She's not infecting you. She's protecting you by wearing a face mask. And, but it's funny. And, in New York City, you have the poorest population, the poorest ethnicity in New York City is Asian, period. Most people don't know that. But there's so many levels of wealth among Asians that when you see the really wealthy Chinese who have come to the States and they're wearing these super expensive face masks, it's really interesting. I've looked at them. They're like the ones that protect them and protect others and stuff. And then you see people who have no face mask like me. And then you have other people. It's sort of, you can almost judge how wealthy you are by what type of face mask you're wearing, which is, I don't know, a new reality. I guess.
New reality. So let's
And
talk
by the
a
way,
little bit
I
about
have a cold. I'm getting over. It's not the coronavirus.
Okay, good to know. And folks, please ask your questions. We want to hear your comments. And our friend, our friend Ying Chan says, "Great to see you, Ti-Hua." She's watching on LinkedIn right now in Hong Kong, where she's in the heart of all the issues the last thing Hong Kong needed was the coronavirus, coming on the heels of all the problems around the protests and everything else. This is the new reality there. And she's doing some terrific work, as always, trying to get information to folks. So let's just take a look at the news. Ex-spies recruited and pushed to attack liberal groups. Former chief of Blackwater, which is already a problematic company, is a guy named Eric Prince.
Who's the brother
of Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education. And this is what they've been doing. They've recruited MI5 or MI6 and CIA and other folks and had them infiltrate run-of-the-mill, opposition research used to be with, searching things online, but they're doing it with spies, actual spies.
Spies on liberal organizations.
Yeah, on liberal organizations. Yeah, absolutely. Stephen's watching from Tokyo, by the way, also in the heart of a country hit by all the problems around coronavirus. And also watching, we have a lovely comment here from Ron Thomas, who is, by the way, going to be one of our inaugural sponsors of our read along. So we're just delighted to have Ron sponsoring us starting next month. His Hong Kong business trip was canceled. He's in Dubai, and he says he always read along always has such great guests and love the show. So thank you for that, Ron. Okay. What else is happening here is on coronavirus. Behind coronavirus chaos at the White House, fears, confusion, and miscommunication mar a response. You couldn't expect anything different. And here is a woman infected by coronavirus brought to the University of Nebraska Medical Center in an isolation pod. First time I'm seeing. Wow. Yeah, it's like, oh my goodness.
And remember that John Travolta movie from years ago called The Boy in the Bubble?
Mm-hmm. And this is, look at this. And I want to give a shout out to these healthcare workers who are the first line of defense and the first to be infected in many cases by these people who walk in off the street.
The doctor who exposed it to the whole world died of it.
I know.
34 years old.
Oh, just so terrible. An Italian official sequester north in emergency. They're basically a quarter of the Italian population is going to be on lockdown. And just as we're going on the air, we were told that the health minister said that the soccer league, the Serie A, has to be shut down because of they're already playing to empty stadiums.
You know what I think really changed a lot of this was that one thing in particular for me was when I heard in Iran, the deputy health minister who was saying coronavirus is not a big deal died of it. When I saw that, I was like, okay, time to pay attention. Okay, it's not panic time, but it's time. This is a lot more serious than I think any of us realizes. And somebody, who's making fun of the coronavirus and then dies of it.
Yeah.
He's the deputy health minister for a whole country. And I think what's interesting is that, the virus knows no boundaries in the sense, and it knows no nationalities and has no loyalties to anybody. So, and that's something that maybe we'll all realize we're one human race. And, we all are facing the same issue here. So
this is a story I've not read yet, but this is from Beijing. China appears to corral threat at a steep cost. And they're able to do things because They don't have,
Well, they're an
you know,
authoritarian regime.
yeah, so they can do things that we can't do here in America. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens. In Greek Shift, vigilante teams target migrants. So it turns out that in the middle of all this, of course, the rest of life goes on, and Greece was, in fact, welcoming of refugees all these years. And now there's active vigilante groups, including violent threats and attacks on refugees. It's very, very sad. And
well, it's very interesting about immigration, and it's realistically you cannot have open borders, but the problem is if we don't all contribute, if we don't help, if not every country, including the United States, has gone opposite to what we used to have. We used to be about give me your tired and your huddle masses, and but now, although we were never totally like that, but for a while it was close to that after the Hart-Celler Act of 1965 that was put in place in 68. But if the whole world does not accept all the refugees and help, and one or two countries are stuck with it, not stuck with it, but they end up taking more refugees, then they're going to have problems. That's a reality. So this is a responsibility for every country in the world. That's personal opinion.
yeah, no, but it's great. We'd love for you to speak up a little bit because some folks are having a little difficulty hearing you, but that's because of your throat, I think, as you said before. Look at this.
You're asking a broadcaster to broadcast louder.
Yeah,
exactly. No problem.
Well, you're used to much more fancy equipment, so they can pick it up better. So here's also another observation, Ti-Hua. No, you just sit. You can sit.
No,
you can sit.
sit.
Yeah, but look at this entire newspaper. There's only one straight story about the election itself, and that's here. Seeing Sanders is only escape in a sea of debt, and these are about people who think everything from the free college to Medicare for all will help their lives be better under a President Sanders. But you can see this is what coronavirus has done, that has pushed it here. This would be a lead story today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting about Sanders because, to be honest, I'm sorry, Kevin, but I've not purchased, the last time I purchased the Sunday paper New York Times was when my son was in the style section. And but I'm a digital subscriber.
Okay, good.
And on the digital, I was reading about Bernie Sanders' problems with the African-American community. And when he went to Flint, he did not get the kind of support that he was hoping for, Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
So, but I need to speak, I need to broadcast, I need to project more, right?
Right. Exactly.
I'm going to blast this out now.
Yeah.
You're going to be sorry you asked me to speak louder.
Anand Prakash, my friend, is watching from Singapore, and I'm sure as we mentioned these cities, if you've been there, you should let us know. That's a cool thing.
I've not been to Singapore, but I've seen Crazy Rich Asians.
Okay. So how much have you traveled in Asia? Where all have you been?
I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Beijing. I've been to Dalian. I landed in Shanghai, which was a funny story I could tell you.
Yeah.
This is years ago, but my dad, who went to Columbia University for grad school, when he would go to the Columbia campus, would do something I thought was very crude. And that is he would roll up his pants in the summertime, take off his shoes and his shoes and his socks, and he'd roll his pants up to here, and he'd sit in the sun. And I remember thinking as a kid, why does he do that? It's so crude and rude and so boorish, and and then when I landed in Shanghai, the first time I was in the main portion of China, when I landed in Shanghai, I saw 40 guys with their shoes off, socks taken off, and pants rolled up. Literally 40 men in one large room, all had done it. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's called cultural difference. And I'd never known that was a cultural thing among, I guess, Chinese men, because I didn't see Chinese women doing this. But for me, it was an epiphany, because I realized a lot of the things and issues I had with my dad, not that there were that many, because he was a very good father, had to do with cultural differences between being an American and being Chinese. So that was it was just funny to step out and see 40 guys like, oh my God, just like my dad at Columbia, So anyway.
Well, let's get that little story in there in terms of your family history. Your dad, where did he came from? Shanghai, or
no? My dad was originally from Tianjin, which is 25 miles south of Beijing. It's an industrial city. He grew up in extreme poverty, unlike what we think of poverty. He basically wore I think he told me he had a flour sack for clothes until he was 6 years old.
Hmm.
And he was illiterate until he was 15. And then he got a job as an apprentice at a pharmacy. And instead of spending the money, he paid like a minimum amount to survive. And he paid an older scholar to teach him how to read and write. So at 15, he began to learn how to read and write. He was so driven and disciplined that at 27, he graduated from the equivalent of Harvard Law School in China, which is an amazing task. My dad was the only person I knew could sit at a desk literally for 16 hours with only bathroom breaks. And I once asked my father, how is it you're able to do that? Because I can't sit at a desk for 16 hours. And he said to me, because to him, learning is a luxury. So anytime he would learn something, he felt as if it was the most wonderful, luxurious gift. And so he would just take in everything he could. And I remember when he was 70 something, he was teaching himself algebra 2 because he'd had dreams that he couldn't do algebra since he was a teenager. But he became a lawyer in China, but he didn't like prosecuting poor people and defending, guilty rich people. So he became a journalist. And my father was a well-known journalist in China for the Guomindang, the Central Daily News, Zhang Rinzhong. And that's his name, was his name. And my father told me after the war, he ended up in Japan as he was the vice president of the Foreign Press Club. And he told me, I gleaned over the years, he came to the United States because basically after the revolution in 1949, he couldn't go back to China and he couldn't go to Taiwan. He couldn't go to Taiwan where the Kuomintang was because he had criticized the Kuomintang for corruption. So they didn't like him. And then the Chinese Communist Party did not like my father because of one story that he did in particular. When he was in Burma with General Stilwell, the American general, he was with the Chinese forces. U.S. and China were allies against Japan and against the Axis powers. And so my father was on a beach and the Americans had just arrived. And my father wrote that he looked down and he saw boxes of toilet paper. And he thought, oh my God, we're going to lose the war. What kind of soldier needs toilet paper for jungle warfare? And he said, but then I looked up, and he wrote this in an article, and I saw acre upon acre upon acre of toilet paper. And I knew America would win the war because he was saying that they had the means of production to produce not only toilet paper, but weapons. And that is the fact that America never got really bombed on the mainland. So they were able to produce tanks and airplanes and win the war. But the Chinese Communist Party said, oh, you praised capitalism. So therefore you cannot come back to China. And my dad did praise capitalism, but he was just telling the truth because there are some things to praise about capitalism. That's the means of production. Problem is you have to have some socialism, I think, that they have things like Social Security and Medicare and unemployment insurance to balance out what capitalism does. Capitalism is the engine. Socialism makes sure that we're all, in there together and not just left behind, which is happening in this country in terms of the disparity in the wealth and income gap. And I see it more in New York City than I'm beginning to see the bad old days of the 90s with crime in New York City and teenage gangs. And I'm wondering how many of them feel this economic disparity between not having and then seeing kids with, iPhones and expensive things, and they don't have that and attacking them for it. Anyway, I'm going off.
No, but I just want to just share some of these comments. Pradnya says, God bless Ti-Hua's dad. And she says, now I'm tearing up listening to the story. Laura says, extraordinary story. Melanie says, wow, what a story. And Ron says, wow, an amazing driven man. And so complete that story. So he gets in trouble. And then what does he do?
Well, so my dad he was a good journalist. And we have a picture of my dad in Hiroshima only 1 month after the bombing and the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And in that picture, my dad's got his arms around a young Japanese boy in a Japanese, I guess it was the uniform they would wear at the time with the cap and the black jacket for school. And in the picture, there are streaks, white streaks that we never understood until much later after I got to college and studied atomic energy, I realized that those were probably gamma radiation rays that were affecting, that were streaking across the old style camera he had with the film. And
just a month after.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I asked my dad, how did you get, he was the first Allied correspondent to get to Hiroshima, and he wrote about it. I asked my dad, how'd you get there? How did you get past all the guards? And he went like this. So apparently he bribed his way into Hiroshima, which is not a great thing, but he's also pretty wild history. He used to gamble too. He would never let me gamble. But I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll get back to the more important ones. But he, in Japan, when he was head of either president of the Foreign Press Club or vice president, and I have documented evidence. I have pictures of him in the Foreign Press Club and stuff with the U.S. Army Signal Corps description of him. And a Russian captain who was I guess it was probably a journalist as well, challenged him to a drinking match. And the Russian said, banged his hand and said, "You cannot beat a Russian drinking vodka." And my dad said, "I bet you $100 US." And back then, $100 US was like that was almost a whole month of your salary. And the guy said, "Drink." And my father said, "You first," And so the Russian captain took the vodka bottle, blah, 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 drank the whole bottle like that, about half, and then collapsed. And he was under the table. And this is a huge audience of journalists watching this, Yeah, he drank, half the bottle. My father said, okay, he took a pen, a marking pen. He marked exactly where the guy drank, the Russian captain, and he marked where he had to drink to beat him. And he said, "Could I have a steak now, please?" Because apparently this was the Foreign Press Club. And my father ate an entire dinner because no one had said how long it had to take him to drink the half bottle of vodka. And he had a dinner and he drank some vodka. And then he said, "I'd like some dessert now." And then he had dessert. And it took him apparently 4 or 5 hours to drink more vodka than the Russian captain. But the Russian captain was still unconscious on the floor. And then by that time, my father won the bet. He took the $200 and went home. A little tipsy, but not that tipsy because it took him several hours. I think he said it took him 4 to 6 hours to finish the vodka. But he said, I had a lot of really good food in between.
Lovely story. Mei Fong says, fascinating stories. Hi, Ti-Hua. Posted this on the AJA Facebook too.
I may.
Yeah. So
Sree has a lot of, as someone at the Young Turks said to me, actually, Jonathan Larson, the managing editor, said, Sree has a lot of influential followers. We're glad you're going to be on his program. So.
That's great. Well, please say hi to Jonathan for me. We're going to come back to your dad's story because we're still not done. We've left him having won a big bet, but there's still a lot to say. Let's just make sure everybody knows we're still going to be discussing the paper and the news as well. When putting on a headscarf is all it takes to get fired. Women's lives upended in Quebec ban. So this is an effort by the hard right in Quebec to say no outward
Shout out
religious.
To George St. Pierre, MMA great, who trains at Renzo Gracie, by the way.
Oh, jiu-jitsu. Nice. Yeah, so we have to hear about your jiu-jitsu too. So yeah, Jewish and Muslim and even Catholic symbols are no longer allowed for public officials and public staff in this part of Canada. And so there's profiles of women. One is a Sikh, one is a Muslim, one is a Catholic, and even a Saumya Patel was asked to remove her scarf. So Saumya, so it just shows you it's a range of religions have been affected by this. So I'm surprised because Hinduism doesn't demand wearing a scarf, but we'll have to read that story. And then look at this ad. End child marriage, let girls dream. Join Chime. This is an organization called Chime, Equality Now and Girls Not Brides, to help ensure girls around the world can pursue their true dreams. Let girls dream. This is part of International Women's Day today.
Past that, I might point out to you, when I was in Iran during the hostage crisis in 1979. It tells you how old I am. And 1980. One of the things I found out was that Iranian men were able to, quote unquote, marry a young girl for 3 weeks while their wife was away, so that the clerics would actually get paid, especially in the rural areas, get paid for a married man when his wife went away to marry some young teenage girl, which was just reprehensible, honestly. But
No, it's what
maybe that's passing later
Yeah.
on, hopefully.
Hopefully. Pradnya says, oh, who cares about the paper? More adventures of Ti-Hua's dad, please. So we'll come back to Ti-Hua's dad. We're going to build up to that. All the drama of Trump's deep state feud, but with a British cast. And this is a story we just heard about, a Miss Patel. And here's another Miss Patel, Preeti Patel, who is the Home Secretary, the equivalent of the head of Homeland and other in England, in the UK. Paris official says he was unaware of a pedophilia writer's abuse. This is about the deputy mayor of Paris was questioned investigating the writer Gabriel Matzneff. And Lebanon says it will default on some debt.
Oh, I was in Lebanon during one of the. I go to a lot of hostage things, but when in 1986 I was in Lebanon, it was.
And Terry Anderson and company were there.
He was actually in prison while I was there. They were but when I was in Lebanon, it was one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen, and I found it interesting because when I went to Bosnia, I thought every extraordinarily beautiful country I've seen seems to be a jewel that everybody wants, like Lebanon and Bosnia and all the fighting that went on there, and so it was so sad.
Here is Citibank is a supporter of an effort called hashtag See Her, Hear Her, because only 21% of all music artists are female. And so that's a campaign. Again, International Women's Day. Palestine Creek bills as fourth Saudi prince is detained by the de facto ruler.
Make me want to buy the paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Like digital subscription. This is different from.
Right. No, the feeling is different. That's why we do this. And look at the size of the updates lettering here.
Yes.
Coronavirus update. Citing an emergency, Italian officials sequester 12 northern regions. Just imagine that. And Ti-Hua, often on these shows, we talk about how America has changed, how the world has changed. Here they are, fur salons going out of business at Bloomingdale's and elsewhere. When you were in college and when I was young also, we used to see like having furs was the ultimate symbol of luxury. And now that's going away. Times change. Starbucks in Seattle closes as employee tests positive. Starbucks, born in Seattle.
Yes.
And here is an ad for a MasterCard series of ads there.
I don't see these ads on the digital version.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Fraud.net.
I read the digital version on my phone, so maybe that's why it's not big enough.
Patricia Freudenberg says, thanks for sharing great insights here on LinkedIn Live. Love that. Though this is CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Committee meeting. They had a big conference and then attendees found to have virus. These are all people who don't believe in science. And so they're going to maybe soon enough. Yeah, administration walks back Trump's claim that anyone who wants may be tested because there is a huge shortage of.
Going back a little bit,
yeah,
I think I don't think it'd be fair to say all conservatives do not believe in science.
That's true.
I think some of them. Clearly, there's this kind of a mentality of the anti-elite, anti-intellectual, anti-science. Not all conservatives, but some do have that. And I think that's really dangerous to have that kind of thinking. And I think the coronavirus will show everyone, unfortunately, prove to everyone that you cannot be anti-science.
And then Cuomo declares an emergency in New York. We should clarify that this is mainly a bureaucratic thing because this now allows easier purchase of equipment and without all the kind of normal billing procedures, and also allows them to hire lots of healthcare workers for things like checking on all the self-quarantine have to be someone has to knock on their door every 24 hours. And so this does not mean that nobody should step out of the house. Like, doesn't mean I shouldn't have come down from the Upper West Side to see Ti-Hua. Just that
what my teenage kids said to me when I told them about the state of emergency, they said, doesn't mean we won't be going to school.
Yeah, exactly. 70 employees of a facility near Seattle became sick. And then there's a story of Buttigieg quietly
sick with coronavirus.
Yeah.
70?
Yeah, 70 employees of a single facility.
It's very, very, the coronavirus is more contagious than any other virus that's hit the world anyway. And again, what I heard was from one infectious disease specialist, you can get it within 6 feet. Somebody breathing, someone has coronavirus within 6 feet. Plus, the lawyer in Westchester County who got coronavirus, his neighbor drove him to the hospital. The neighbor got coronavirus.
I know.
I don't know if it's just from that one drive or they saw each other more. And by the way, not to be racially profiling, but he's white, the guy that had the coronavirus, and his neighbor.
Right.
So,
And we should make a point about this. This is important because somebody hearing, because it's the second reference we've made to white people. It's because no, of course not. But it's important that there is a feeling of anti-Asian sentiment, especially East Asian sentiment, because this started in Wuhan. Anyone who looks East Asian is a potential target for racists and the ignorant. And we've seen the Chinatown restaurants have been decimated by people not going in. One of my friends in
not just Chinatown restaurants, also all the businesses. I just got my hair cut in China. I do a lot of my business in Chinatown in terms of, my accounting, my banking, my haircuts, and going to eat. And one of the things is the person who was cutting my hair, Jenny, told me that she has no business. They have very few people coming in because of this fear. And, I have to tell you, this reminds me a lot of what happened when the AIDS crisis first broke out. And I think the most important thing to realize is that when something like this happens, it's really important to address it scientifically and medically, and not politically on either side. When the AIDS crisis first broke out, and I did research on this when I was at ABC News, when the AIDS crisis first broke out, a number of the gay organizations would not allow the health department in San Francisco to close down the gay bathhouses. But what was happening was that at that time, they estimated that gay men were going into the gay bathhouses, and then they would have unprotected sex with 10 partners per night. And that spread the AIDS virus like wildfire. And then when they realized that, the gay organizations withdrew their opposition, and then they closed down these bathhouses. On the other side to that, people, I remember when I was in Denver as a reporter, they wouldn't even touch a person who had AIDS. And that was something where it's the fear of the unknown. And when that fear strikes, people's prejudices tend to come out. And I think it's showing up now with the coronavirus. Yes, clearly, if it started in China, it does sort of make sense. Okay, if it started in China, I see somebody who's Chinese, but does that mean they just came from Wuhan, one particular place? It doesn't really make sense. And if somebody's, born and raised in the United States, and you're afraid they have, coronavirus, well, the reality is now, then you got to worry about Italians, you got to worry about Iranians. And again, in New York City, most of the people who have tested positive for coronavirus have been white. They've not been Asian at all. So that's something, it's going to spread around the world. But that's something to think about. Again, the theme has to be, I think, you have to approach diseases scientifically and medically, and not politically at all on either side. That's critically important, I think, in dealing with these kind of diseases.
Folks, we are so glad you're joining us for this conversation with Ti-Hua Chang, legendary journalist, and who is new to he's got a new gig, and he's going to tell us more about it in a minute. But we'd love for you to tag your friends, share this conversation, and you should know that we do this every Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We're live on LinkedIn and Facebook. This is our 5th year that we're starting, and we're so proud to be able to bring you this great content every Sunday morning. And our friend Carla Baranakis, former copy chief of the New York Times, is watching from a hospital where she's there for surgery. And we just hope you're okay and staying safe, because hospitals are not the safest places to be right now, unfortunately. And we are just really happy to have this online community. And this story,
make sure she has a patient advocate. Everybody who's in a hospital should have a patient advocate with them, someone watching out for you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. And Carla says comparison to the early days of AIDS is right on target.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I hope that's true.
And we just said how America has changed, and for me to see this incredible run of Pete Buttigieg is really special. To see him and his husband out there. There are people who criticize him for not pushing it even more, the fact that he's gay. But
it's interesting. It didn't come up.
Yeah,
which was great.
Yeah, it tells you America has
changed. It wasn't the main issue about him.
Yeah, and if you wondered what happens when you work on a campaign and the candidate drops out, there's a story about cash condolences and beer emojis via Venmo when campaigns fizzle, people are getting
By the
$10,
way,
$25 from their friends as condolences.
Before you go away from Buttigieg, my new boss, Jonathan Larson, who's the managing editor at TYT.com Investigates, he did most of the stories about Buttigieg and his relationship with the African American police officers and police chief. He broke that story, really put TYT Investigates on the map on that.
Yeah. As time catches up to Nazi collaborators, justice found one too. And this is somebody who I think is in his 90s. 95-year-old Friedrich Karl Berger was ordered to return to Germany.
From where?
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So the Nazi next door. There's a show right now on, I believe it's on Amazon, called Hunters, about a Nazi hunter, a fictional story about Amazon.
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino. And this is that story, lead story in the New York Times today about the former head of Blackwater, a very dicey company to begin with, who is now recruiting ex-spies from the CIA, MI5, MI6 to infiltrate liberal groups. Just horrifying story.
That reads that his background would be something that sounds like one of those action movies, but not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, bad guy action movie. And there's a story about people putting their trust in Sanders because of everything that's happening, returning from the front lines to find jobs ill-suited to their training. And veterans, unemployment is lower than ever, but problems persist. And this is what you were talking about, Ti-Hua, that we keep hearing from the president how great the economy is before all this current crisis. But there is really there are so many Americans who are doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs to survive. And the stock market doesn't help them in any way. The stock market rise is not for them. And here's someone from Albania. She was the Lady Macbeth of Albania. Imagine having that on your obit in the New York Times. 99 years old.
Oh, Hoxha.
Yeah. And what she really sought was power and visibility for herself. Her husband was Enver Hoxha, who was the communist dictator of Albania. Yes. And here is a nice service from the New York Times. How to pronounce the name. Nejmia Hoja. So that's the pronunciation. Nejmia Hoja. Sometimes even the pronouncers are hard to tell.
I would say Hoxha too.
But it's Hoja. So there you go. And Steve Weber, 76, guitarist and innovator of the zany Holy Modal Rounders, is dead. And Gary Kuntz, 65, Swiss chef who fused French and Asian.
Okay, so when I read that kind of stuff, it makes me very nervous because I'm 69. So
see, no one would tell Ti-Hua. Nobody would know your age because you are just so young looking.
Well, you know what my son says?
Yeah,
there's an expression. I hope no one gets offended. It's called Asian no raisin.
Yeah, Asian don't raisin. Yeah,
Asian don't raisin.
Yeah. It doesn't raisin. Basically. So it's basically that how your skin is better than say mine, which
melanin too.
Yeah, but not like what African Americans, they have a similar saying for a saying also. Yeah, they have a saying for that too.
Black
but yeah, exactly. And Asian don't raisin. You're allowed to say that. And
it's real, both the skin, but on African descendants, it's also the bone density. That's why Denzel Washington can still do lead roles now. But I don't know, he's 60 something too.
Yeah,
70,
well,
so.
you certainly could. And so, what is their secret of your youth apart from your Asian genes?
Well, this is all my own hair, and I don't dye it. So, and my mother's 98, and she has mostly black hair. So,
by the way, having black hair, you're saying undyed is important because in India, everybody has black hair because we just dye the heck out of our hair.
Well, so do most Chinese, to be honest. You can see it's really, well, I don't want to make fun of people, but when you see somebody who has the gray here in the middle, it's all black, and right in the center of this gray. I keep saying you got to put it on the side so they don't see it.
Yeah.
I think the main thing, if you look at a lot, it's just genetics, but also exercise is, I think, the most important thing. And I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm only a mediocre blue belt at Renzo Gracie, but that's a decent blue belt anywhere else because they're the best, in my opinion. And so the exercise is extremely intense. And as long as I don't die one day doing Jiu-Jitsu, I should be okay. But I think exercise is really critically important. So.
And what about your diet?
Okay. My diet's, not all that great. I tried being a vegetarian. I was telling Sree, I lost 8 pounds in 1 week. I had to give it up. Uh, I think about sometimes all the animals we eat in the world. I mean, we're so voracious. We eat everything. It's like, and then, and I would like to only eat plants, frankly, but I can't do it. I'm just too skinny. I went from 168 to 160 pounds in 1 week. And I thought, okay, and then when you do jujitsu, losing those 8 pounds, it makes a difference. They throw you around more easily and choke you more easily. So,
Well, let's get back to the New York Times, folks.
Way,
yeah,
can people hear me a little better? I mean, if anyone
yeah,
could tell Sree.
yeah, we can see that. Yeah, I think they can. And here's we're going to watch a little bit of you doing jiu-jitsu in this video there's the Renzo Gracie. Is
Henzo
Gracie.
Brazilian, the R pronounced like
yeah. And so this is a story. Tell us what's going on here. This is a story.
I'm being interviewed for something. It's Marissa Morimoto, who's on YouTube, and she's doing a story about aging. She does a lot of stories about aging, mentality, dealing with death, all this stuff. And then she interviewed my dentist, and he mentioned, well, I have this 69-year-old friend who does jujitsu. She said, what? And so they came. And the funny thing about this, I'm choking the guy. This guy, Dylan, kills me. But of course, he's about, 40 years younger than me and 60 pounds heavier. But what was interesting is the young guy, Micah, I was rolling with, wrestling with, and doing jujitsu. He got so excited, he was on YouTube. He started slamming me onto the floor. And I had to say to him, Micah, take it easy. I know this is YouTube, but don't kill me during the workout. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's YouTube. And they went, bam, and put me onto the ground and stuff. So, but it's, you just have the people choke you. They do stuff. It's attack. Jiu-jitsu originated with the samurai as unarmed combat, basically to kill each other or just disable somebody or maim them. But
was it after you lost your sword or something?
Yes, when you lost your sword in battle and stuff. But the good thing about it is that, when you roll now, it's very, very tough, but you can always tap out and say, I give up. I call uncle. Don't choke me anymore. Don't break my knees. Don't, break my ankles and stuff like that. So
sounds a little like MMA.
Oh, MMA,
mixed martial arts.
Well, MMA, Bruce Lee started the concepts in MMA, taking from the best of everything. But in 1993, Royce Gracie took on everybody with jiu-jitsu and beat everybody. And I saw that video like a lot of people. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to try this. I have a black belt in Shotokan karate, which is great too, because Lyoto Machida proved it's very important. But then you realize these days to be a complete fighter, you have to really be both a striker and a grappler. You have to have both. You can't have just one or the other, because everybody is studying both now. And just it's a lot of fun, as long as you don't get hurt too badly. I shouldn't be doing it, frankly. But
I'm so sorry. I'm so stuck on your being 69, which is just incredible age, first of all, and that you still have so much energy. It's also how much of this is mental? You credited your exercise, your diet, everything else, but how much, and genes, but how much of it is mental attitude that lets you be so young?
Maybe because I don't think about it. I try to forget how old I am. But once in a while in jiu-jitsu, I do use that a lot. If someone's beating me, I'd say, you know how old I am?
And that distracts them, and then you get them.
No. I say, I'm 69. They go, oh, I'm sorry. And they slow down. Then I can do something. I got one young guy who's 27. This is when I was 67. And I did a takedown. It was actually a single leg takedown. And I said to him, that's 2 points. And then I guess I got him from the back, or what did I get? Oh, I got him with an Ezekiel choke, where you take this and you choke somebody. And then he tapped out, and I said, hey, how old are you? He goes, 27. I said, I'm 67. You might want to rethink jiu-jitsu. And I said, I'm just kidding. People beat me all the time. I'm just kidding.
Right.
So anyway. But
Carla has a question. Has Ti-Hua ever used his martial arts on the job?
Not on the job, but some of the photographers that I worked with would say, oh, I like working with you because we get attacked. We always know you're going to step in between. So I never used it, but I would have if I needed necessary. But I have used it one time. Okay, I can't tell exactly how this happened, but I was at Times Square and I got attacked. And that was the last. I don't get in street fights. I avoid fights. And I think most martial artists avoid fights. But this was where I got attacked at Times Square on New Year's Eve, right after the ball drop, and then I had to use my martial arts and stuff. That was what, 2001? Was it 2001? Yeah, 2001 to 2002. So I don't get in street fights every 25 years or so.
So you're due for one soon.
I'm due for one.
Nobody challenging, please. Susan says 69 is the new 49. So that's you look younger than me. So I think that's amazing.
You're 49.
Yeah. I turned 50 this year.
You did?
I do turn 50 in
You're
October.
49.
Yeah,
You are
I am
actually
49. I am 40. Yeah, no, I am 49. Yeah, thank you. But I feel 89. Susan says my secret is hair color and Photoshop. She says she's a great headshot photographer, by the way. So we're looking at a picture here of Sarah Jessica Parker and Matthew Broderick, who are now together on a show. But I first saw this and I thought this was Chris Hitchens, the great writer and raconteur and troublemaker. And from this angle, it looks a little like
But
Chris
what I
Hitchens.
love about Matthew Broderick, besides, obviously, like many others in the 90s, I watched her in Sex and the City.
Yeah.
But also, Matthew's very funny. I saw him in a 60 Minutes interview, and he was asked, what's great about being married to Sarah Jessica Parker, being married in general? And he said, lots of shampoo. He said she always has lots of shampoo.
Yeah, there's never a shortage.
And after that, and I realized after I got married, I was like, he's right. My wife has we've got almost 20 bottles of shampoo between my wife and my daughter, and they're all theirs. Of course, my son has a lot of shampoo too, so maybe I'm the only one that doesn't use a lot of shampoo.
This showbiz couple have mostly avoided each other on stage, but they're together almost full time in Plaza Suite on Broadway. So that's interesting.
What happens when you work together with somebody and you live together? You just get sick of them.
Yeah. So we're just going to flip through the art section. Let us know if you've seen any of these shows.
I want to see that, but I can't afford it.
Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Oh, he did.
School. It's very nice. They allow some high school kids to go see it.
Questlove from The Roots, and Lungs is a show. I don't know. I was at the Old Vic in London, but it's coming to BAM
This
at Brooklyn
is very
Academy.
funny. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually missed the ads.
Yeah, the ads are, I think, part of why I like the paper.
Yeah.
And now inseparable 8 times a week about them. Death, Mayhem, and Some Laughs. This is Martin McDonagh's Hangman. We just watched this. We saw this on Broadway in previews.
Wait,
we loved it.
Have you seen Hamilton?
Yes, I have.
I have not seen it.
You have?
Yeah. It's very funny.
Yeah.
When Hamilton was at the Public Theater, I heard about it. And I said to my wife, I said, hey, I heard about this great play at the Public Theater. We should go see it. He said, what's it about? I said, well, it's about Alexander Hamilton done in hip hop. She said, I don't want to see that. Then
that's what we all thought. Yeah.
A year later, she said, oh, my girlfriend said this great play on Broadway. And I said, honey, the tickets are now $1,000. There's no way I'm going to go see that.
But you can, if you book in advance, they're slightly more reasonable. But you have to plan out in advance. They are selling tickets
what's
for
slightly more reasonable.
Well, $100, $150 range. Yeah, because the base price is still the same. It's the resale and all of that's happening. And God knows what's going to happen to Broadway. I think it's going to be lots of people will avoid. You said 6 feet, like Broadway. You're sitting inches from folks. Deflecting Hollywood's male gaze. Women who direct are actually aware of the industry's tendency to objectify male characters, so in their own work they are avoiding that trap. So this is about female filmmakers and how Haley Williams saved herself.
Here's something I would mention that diversity of all kinds, both gender and racial and ethnic, really helps. It improves things. Having more female directors and stuff brings us a whole new genre and a different perspective on films, and they're more interesting.
Carla says, by the way, that To Kill a Mockingbird is awesome. Willie says, I've taught it, but I've never had a chance to see it in Pakistan, says Willie, who teaches To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's one of my favorite novels.
And look at Spike Lee. He's been in a fight with Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Hey, bring back Jeremy Lin.
Yeah. Asia Week at Vornado. I'm not sure what's happening there, but an excavated voice never leaves her. Hilary Mantel has finished her trilogy on Thomas Cromwell, and this is a book that's gotten a lot of Attention and Adopting Roth and His Prose, a series on the rise of a demagogic Charles Lindbergh. This is the plot against America based on Philip Roth's novel, which is if he had become president. Charles Lindbergh was a nationalist, white supremacist and fascist and everything.
Supported Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Look at this, The Secret Life of Plastic Bags. Another thing I thought would never happen in New York is you can't just go in and get a plastic bag in a store anymore.
That's great. I mean, I have to say that, especially, since I'm going to be a climate change reporter. I mean,
yeah.
One of the issues I have is that, when I first heard about that huge island of plastic in the Pacific, the size of Texas, I mean, that was just like, people don't realize this. Most of the plastics are not being recycled. We all think they're being recycled, but they're actually just being dumped, especially now that China is not taking America's
garbage.
Garbage
anymore. Yeah. From tailoring to sportswear, men's fashion that disobeys all the rules. This is the men's fashion cover. Ready, set, go. This is T magazine. This is, you want ads. You got lots of ads here. I love looking through this. And this is men's fashion this time. And are you fussy about any of your clothes? Or is that a question I should ask your wife?
No, my wife buys all my clothes.
Yeah.
To be honest, I buy my suits from Macy's online, $99. I mean, they're really good. Kenneth Cole, 40 regular, fits me perfectly. So
if anybody wants to send you clothes, just 40 regular, just send it.
$99 is all I get. So.
Yeah, no, that's I'm dressed by my now 16-year-old daughter. She saw one of my videos and so horrified how I was dressed, and then took me to her favorite store, Uniqlo, and started dressing me up.
That's where my wife buys my clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, my daughter bought me some for presents. Bought me a better T-shirt.
Nice. Beijing, China banned plastic bags in 2006, says Andrew Lee.
In 2006.
Yeah, that's early. And other places, I think, have been doing that. Mumbai beat New York City for it for the last time.
But you know what? In Beijing,
last year it's been plastic bag free, says Kalpana.
I went to Beijing in the 1980s. The air was so clean.
Mm.
It was dusty because it's at the edge of the Gobi Desert, but everybody was on a bicycle then, and the air was clean. Now there's so many cars you can barely breathe in Beijing. I've not been there since, but
the Great Wall Street housing grab about how hundreds of companies now own hundreds of thousands of family homes all over America, and making the American dream further out of reach. So very, very sad.
I had an article in the Times Magazine years ago, and they are so the editing is so intense over every single word. They really do a good job. I mean, I don't know if I'm assuming they still do.
I'm sure they still do. The whispered threat between the lines of a political ad campaign. There are no hospitals or patients or injuries, no healing. I'm not sure what that's about. Aaron Sorkin on the dramatic shortcomings of the current political moment. I understand the difference between the real world and the West Wing.
I love the West Wing.
Okay, so one of the things you don't know that we do here on the show is we read the poem out loud. Or I will read it, and I will butcher it because I'm reading it cold. But that's one of the traditions of the show. Waking After the Surgery by Leela Chatty. See, I don't even know how to pronounce the person's name. And just like that, I was whole again. Seemed like a drawing of an eyelid closed, gauze resting atop it like a bed of snow laid quietly in the night while I was somewhere or something else, not quite dead, but nearly freer, myself unlashed for a while as if it were a dog I had simply released from its leash, or a balloon slipped loose from my grip in a room with a low ceiling, my life bouncing back within reach, my life bounding toward me when called. Beautiful poem.
May I do a bit of nepotism here?
Yes, please.
So my older brother, Ti-Hua Chang, is a nationally published poet, HAN-HUA Chang. So look him up.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's great. And where does he live?
He lives on the Upper West Side.
Oh, nice. We should all get together on the Upper West Side. Okay. Another thing we do here, the Ti-Hua, that we didn't warn you about is that I read the ethicist column question, and we'll ask you your answer. There's no right or wrong, and then we'll see what he says. So you can just sit. I'll just ask you this question.
You want me to see
I don't need to. It doesn't matter too. Anyway, okay. Here's a question. About a year ago, my husband and our 2 young children and I were in a car accident for which we were found at zero fault. No one was seriously injured. I received a neck injury that still nags me, but doesn't prevent me from working and doing activities. My husband had some bruising. One child was too young at the time to register what was happening, etc. We sought therapy for him, and he is fully recovered. The car was completely wrecked, and we received an insurance payout to replace it. At the time, several friends urged us to see a lawyer so we could make sure fair financial compensation after the accident. We live in British Columbia, where every car owner must buy into a public insurance system. So I'm just waiting to see what the question is. So anyway, I was ultimately convinced, because we didn't know the extent of my neck injury, to get a payout, I guess, from receive some insurance money. It was about a year later now, and my husband has received $20,000 for his claim. I received $20,000, and my son $25,000 before lawyers' fees. I felt appalled about the amount of money we're taking from the public system when it's clear that we have no long-term effects. Many of my friends, including my husband, have the view that it's fair compensation, given that it was a very traumatic episode. I can't shake the feeling that we're taking advantage of the situation. For more context, my husband and I both have good jobs, and we're not in desperate need of money. Can I just say, this is a Canadian question, right? Like, no American is writing this.
Well, so America is a lot more litigious. And when I heard the amount, $20,000, I was thinking most Americans go, I would have gone for $1 million, you know? So if she had gone for $1 million, I think I would have agreed with her that she no long-term effects, but you're going for 20,000. Frankly, I don't think that's enough.
Yeah. So let's see what Professor Kwame Anthony Appiah says. This is, if you will excuse my saying so, a very Canadian problem. He just said that. In your province, British Columbia, you have a public system of auto insurance. The question of how much compensation for pain and suffering is appropriate has no straightforward answer. So anyway, you're free to find a well-run charity and direct some of the damages you've been paid to those whose needs are beyond question. So I think it's a fair answer too.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you have car insurance in New York, there's 2 levels. One is the basic level, but there's another level that adds about 40% more that protects you when you get sued for millions of dollars for these injuries, because we're such a litigious society.
And so you if you have a car, you recommend, if you can afford it, get the other.
When I was speaking to they said, you know, if you don't get this and you're in an accident and it's your fault, you could lose everything. So there are 2 levels of insurance.
All right. Here, you said your dad was a big gambler and says recommends how to do gambling, I guess. It's a good idea to be on speaking terms with bad luck. And then how to make a wildflower bomb. I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what a wildflower bomb is or why we should be making it. Do you cook?
My wife is a really good cook. I can cook breakfast.
Okay.
Good breakfast.
Steel coat. Yeah, I know you did, and I'm steel coats. I love that. I'm on intermittent fasting, so unfortunately won't be eating for a while. Okay, greetings, Premier. I run a gay website. Blued, a wildly popular gay dating app in China, has helped a generation come out of the closet cautiously by Li Ling Lu and illustrations by Timo Lanzan. So look at that Chinese flag turning into a rainbow. The problem with being gay in China is that as long as you keep your sexual orientation private, you are fine, but you cannot receive public respect and recognition.
Well, at one point in some of the socialist countries, they would jail you if you were gay.
Right.
In Cuba, that was the case. You know, and in China, I'm sure it's both the culturally conservative and probably the system. So that's a welcome change.
Yep. And this is a story about what's happening with giant companies buying hundreds of thousands of homes. And the auteur, The Strange New World of Hideo Kojima's Video Games by Adrian Chen, photographed by Keizo Kitamjima. And so he is, I guess he makes games about things like The Walking Dead and so many stories that you don't, this is why I love print, because you won't seek out some of these stories, right? The serendipity of the journalism is what's so great. Look at all these housing ads, all multiple $1 million homes, all in this. Look at this. This is all ads.
Well, it's the only people who can afford the ads.
Yeah, exactly. And then are you a crossworder or anybody in your family?
I'm terrible at crosswords, actually.
Yeah. And here's another ad for Kill a Mockingbird. So we should get sponsored by To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's see. Where do you want to go next? Should we do travel?
I love travel.
Yeah.
I like sports. They have MMA in here.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll do that next. Okay. A turn in India's wine country. Windu Goyal, my friend, who is a Mumbai correspondent. The Nashik region is still no Napa Valley, but its casual approach to tourism is part of the charm. And you'll find a few delightful bottles. How great is that? And in the Caribbean, enjoying more than a day at the beach. Tropical forest chocolates and history await the sandy shores of these 5 islands.
You know what I'm thinking as I look at this? I'm thinking, okay, if any one of them has the coronavirus,
They're all
in-
spitting.
they're all-
Drinking.
eating each other.
It's the serendipity. Let's see here.
By the way, should we show them how I cough?
Yes, please. Yeah. There you go. Very
Right.
important. Yeah, very, very important. What's happening in the jiu-jitsu world during Corona? Are people not doing it? Or-
Well, that's an interesting thought. I mean, because while I've done jujitsu, I've gotten MRSA infection. I got conjunctivitis, as well as a couple of broken bones. And so this, I mean, obviously the contact there is a lot closer than 6 feet. It's very intense, and you wrestle with different people, a half dozen people, in a room with a lot of.
Are you going this week?
I am.
Okay, brave man.
Tuesday.
Brave man. Travel advice during the outbreak. That's our
Oh, that's gonna be
coronavirus.
my new defense.
What?
When I approach somebody,
Mhm.
I'm gonna start coughing
And-
run away.
This is the wine country story.
Wait,
Yeah.
let's look at that picture.
Yeah, just look how beautiful these are. The Sula is the most famous Indian wine, and we always try to get the bottle when you come over for dinner.
Well,
We always try to have that.
unfortunately, I stopped drinking about 5 or 6 years ago. Oh, that's another thing that's good for longevity.
Is
Stay
drinking
away
wine,
from alcohol, drugs. Obviously smoking.
right? More than a day at the beach in the Caribbean, and there's a story here about Puerto Rico. Anyone here interested in Puerto Rico? Rupa and I went to Puerto Rico 20 years ago and fell in love with it, and have been multiple times. So if you're interested
Have
in
you been
learning
there
about Puerto Rico,
recently
yeah,
after
we've
the-
been 4 times in recent months.
Recent months?
Yeah, we love
Oh.
Puerto Rico, so it's so great. We went for our 20th anniversary, etc. 36 hours in Zermatt, Switzerland. Have you been?
Um, I've been to Switzerland right after when I flew back from Lebanon,
Right.
and all I remember was how peaceful Zurich was and how orderly and boring compared to Beirut.
Here's a big. Are you a frequent flyer collector? Miles.
I am.
Okay,
I'm
so
not very good at it. But
yeah,
I am.
frequent flyer miles killing the planet. That's one of the suggestions in England, is to stop offering frequent flyer miles because it will get fewer people flying. But all of this is moot in today's time when people aren't flying as much, and the travel industry is going to be decimated.
Yeah.
So it'd be
But
interesting to see
every
what
time you
happens.
fly between New York and San Francisco, you're putting almost 600 kilograms of carbon into the air.
Right.
Your carbon footprint is really bad because it just takes a lot of jet fuel to fly.
Folks, a reminder that we're starting our New York Times Read Along sponsorships next week. And so if you would like to be a sponsor of the New York Times Read Along, please let us know. Rates are very reasonable, and we have a global, fabulous, smart audience. Metropolitan section, which is not easily available online. Anti-Semitic jokes spread anguish. In New Jersey, a high school is split open by an offensive photo, swastikas, and Hitler memes. Lyrical strangers feel at home. Google searches
How
help.
is a swastika and Hitler meme a joke?
Oh yeah, well
Look at
that's
Yeah.
well. Google searches help a couple revive their karaoke business in their living room.
Oh, okay. Stop.
Yeah.
Just so you know, and I know this won't change anything. In America, they say karaoke.
Yeah.
That's the incorrect pronunciation. It is karaoke. Kara means empty, and it basically says empty orchestra, meaning an orchestra without a voice.
Oh,
So
nice.
even though Americans, they go, yeah, I'm going to go karaoke. It's karaoke. And when I tried to correct my newsroom in that at one place, they refused to change it, and I'm sure it won't change. But just in an attempt to correct it.
Sure, and I know that karate
Karate
is
is the
karate.
same character.
Yeah,
It's the same character for empty.
yeah.
So karate and
Empty hand.
karaoke.
Yeah, empty hand. It means.
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
And there's a Seinfeld about this, as there is about everything, where Kramer starts to say karate, and people like roll their eyes because he's saying it in that way. Yeah.
But you know what? I think Jerry Seinfeld's very funny, but I stopped watching Seinfeld after every East Asian was an object of derision.
I remember that.
stopped
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
it.
I remember that.
Although I have seen his stuff on Netflix, and I think it's better. But
More anguish.
supported Margaret Cho, so I have to say he does do good things.
Right. All right. Sports Sunday. So you should know we don't usually read the sports section because
No,
I'll tell you why. I love sports.
you're such
but-
an effete intellectual.
No. I love sports. But the reason I don't read it is most times it's all about American sports that most of our audience has very little interest in.
Well, most of your audience is not in America.
No, even the Americans who are, but we certainly the outsiders. But anyway, but with you, I'm glad to read it. The world's best climber confronts the Olympics and his only weakness. The problem is I'm not fast enough to turn off my brain, says Adam Ondra. He's doing his best to race to the top in Tokyo, but the speed wall is not his friend. I didn't know climbing was a...
Have you ever done rock climbing?
Very poorly. I've done it a couple
I did it once in Colorado, and I went up basically a 7-story piece of flat rock, and all I felt was fear the entire time.
Yeah.
And then I found out that's what you're supposed to feel. That's their adrenaline.
Yeah. So tell us your teams.
Well, anything in New York. Unfortunately, the Knicks keep losing, so I'm following the Brooklyn Nets.
And they just lost their head coach.
And I love LeBron James. I think he's a great guy.
Yeah. And what about soccer?
I know it's the number one sport in the world. I don't really follow it. And when I would see those people, the hooligans beating each other up, it's sort of like, really?
You don't hear as much about that anymore.
Really? Is that as much?
Yeah, certainly. Hey, look at this. Somebody receiving acupuncture.
Here's a funny story about acupuncture. When acupuncture first came out in the U.S., hearing about it in the 70s, they said it was psychosomatic. So the Chinese doctors used acupuncture on a cow, open heart surgery on a cow. And they said, if it's psychosomatic, how do we talk to the cow?
Right.
And after that, and now it's actually accepted. The American Medical Association, which opposed it for many, many years, now accepts acupuncture as legitimate therapy.
Fleeing Babylon for a wild life. Some people are wary of civilization's prospects, are taking a one-way trip to the Stone Age. Maybe that's not such a bad idea. Sick? Not if the rich can help it. Coronavirus fears translate to chartered planes, yachts, and germ-free luxury hideaways. And J.B. Smoove, speaking of Seinfeld, is one of the actors on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Do you read any science fiction ever?
Some, yeah.
There's a great science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, who wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. And one of the things he wrote about was, in order to prevent disease, that in the future, people started developing these 3-dimensional rooms where you can actually, the holograms are so good, it's almost as if the person's there. But so people didn't connect physically anymore to prevent disease. They'd go to these 3D rooms, they would interact. But in order to interact, so that it was interesting, they'd all be naked, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
Science fiction always has that. It's for nerdy people.
Yeah.
But he also talked about how news in his future would start out with, here's the Rock'em Sock'em news. This is the way it really is. And as time goes by, I see more and more
of that. Yeah. We also like to read the tiny love stories. The modern love column is long, but the tiny love stories is a 100-word story. So The Vanishing Magician. I was smitten with the magician. Unexpectedly alone at his show, I volunteered to be his audience participant. Of course, she was the only one. On stage, he asked me to write an everyday object on a piece of paper. I wrote electric toothbrush and sealed the envelope. Does it vibrate? He said, smiling furtively, apparently reading my mind. We went on a few dates and he sent me an email to break it off. Gmail suggested some responses. I understand. I agree with you. No worries. I wish he had dumped me via magic instead. He could have just disappeared. Jenny Gorelick's piece. Very, very nice.
Good last line.
Yeah. And the coronavirus is upending the fashion world, the restaurant world. Like you can do every single thing, including the religious world. The LA Times cover story, front page has a story today about this. Okay, now we're getting toward the end here. We want to do a couple of things. We want to have Ti-Hua tell us more about his new gig in a minute. Steve from Tokyo is asking, so that's what the impact is. We also want to hear, there's a video of your acceptance speech of the Peabody, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, Peabody. I think the museum is the Peabody Essex Museum in Boston, but the Peabody is the award that you have from the University of Georgia. So we're going to play a little bit about that video. So we're going to do all that. And then we want to hear more about your adventures, and we want to finish the adventures of Ti-Hua's dad. So we have a lot to do in the next 5-10 minutes. But here I'm going to read you one of these questions. Political divide. I have a friend who's strongly opinionated like me. Recently, we were watching a political debate, and I suggested that one of the candidates would be better suited to a cabinet position. This led to a long, drawn-out debate on both sides that ended in a mutual silence. We haven't spoken since. Should I drop this person as a friend, Ti-Hua Chang?
No. Actually, I think I was watching a fascinating video on was on Facebook, I think, and it was where a woman had gone to demonstrate at a against Muslims, and she was the only one who showed up, and she was like, "I've read the Quran. I hate Muslims," and a group of Muslim Americans were trying to talk to her. After an hour and a half, they convinced her to come into the temple and
The mosque. Yeah.
into the mosque and drink some water. And I thought, I've got to watch this. How in the world did they get this woman who hated Muslims and was demonstrating, the only one, to actually go into the mosque and drink some water? And then at 45 minutes, what happened was she said, Barack Obama's killed more Muslims than any other president. And the Muslim American said, I agree with you. And from that point on, she started to listen. And I thought, that's where you begin. You begin on where do we agree? For example, when I talk to people about politics, one of the first things I say is, do we agree that in America, it should be liberty and justice for all? Because if you can't agree with that, then I really can't talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we need to do is people need to listen now. I think, honestly, Donald Trump has created an atmosphere of hate. And I think that what happens is that, and division, and I think a president should be unifying the country, not dividing it. But I think what we need to do is let's start on where, let's listen to each other. Let's start on what do we agree on? And then let's civilly find out what we disagree on. And I think that's a good way to start. I don't think you should not be with your friend just because you disagree on who should get a cabinet position. That's like so picky.
Yeah.
And by the way, were you talking about Andrew Yang? Because I think he should get a cabinet position.
Yeah, I hear he's also going to run for mayor of New York. I didn't know he's a New Yorker,
about
but he's a New Yorker. I didn't realize that. I associated him with
He's in New
California.
York State.
Yeah, I didn't
He's
associate.
from
Yeah, but
upstate New York.
where does he live? I didn't know all this. So let's start with what we agree on each other, says Ti-Hua Chang. This is a quote that we're putting on the highlighting what you just said. Okay, so the answer from Philip Galans, who writes the etiquette column, Social Cues. He says, if you and your friend are so self-important that you believe others must bend to your will on all matters, including the makeup of fantasy political cabinets, then yes, drop this person as a friend at once. Otherwise, simply agree to disagree and move on to your next debate. The strongly opinionated need worthy opponents more than most. I love that. So yeah, I think you both are saying something similar and important. And here is the virus fears pose problems for wedding business. So like every part of America is definitely showing up as having trouble.
Interesting. I've not looked at the Sunday New York Times in a lot, and certainly not this comprehensively. But I noticed that the ads are all really high end now.
Yeah,
Louis Vuitton,
especially here in the style section and look at the business section. Look at, it's like a magazine. It's, you know, they're spending a lot of energy trying to make the print subscription valuable and doing some exclusives and layout and design and making it 9 reasons to stop doing your own taxes. Anybody needs an accountant? My accountant is terrific. Padma, please write to me and I'll connect you with her. We've been together for 25 years and she is amazing. If you want to recommend your Chinatown accountant, you're welcome to.
Yeah, it's Mew and Associates, MIU.
MIU and Associates, great. And mine is
Mew.
and mine is Padma Vaidyanathan. She's amazing. The PAVA Group, PAVA Group, the Gig Workers Guide to Surviving Tax Season. Look how beautifully this is laid out and so much useful information here. Best tax prep documents, etc. All right, very quickly, last things we're going to do is look at book review. What have you last read? What are you reading these days? Do you have time?
I'm reading a lot of things about climate change.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to tell you that I'm going to an event tomorrow night on Monday night at Stony Brook University, where I'm teaching 2 days a week with Somini Sengupta, who's the New York Times travel climate correspondent. That's her job, global climate change she's covering. And so that's a really good gig. And you guys should connect and share.
Absolutely.
Yeah, see.
Maybe I'll go with you tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be great. And have you read any of the big books that are, let's see, the biggest books in fiction? 1 Minute Out by Mark Greaney, American Dirt by Jeannie Cummins, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, who is terrific and a friend, Chasing Cassandra by Lisa Kleypas.
The last book that I read was called Pachinko, written by a Korean American who's from Queens. And it's about the Korean diaspora from North Korea to Japan.
Wow.
And the discrimination that they faced in Japan and stuff.
Yeah, the number one book in the land in nonprofit is, nonfiction is The Mamba Mentality by Kobe Bryant, The Talk Towers by David Enright, Open Book by Jessica Simpson, A Very Stable Genius by Philip Rucker and Carol Leoning, and Untrumping America by Dan Pfeiffer. All right, so we want to do a couple of things. First, you have to tell us about the Christmas tree, and it's Easter, and we still have it up.
Well, I think part of the reason is my wife and children, my son and my daughter, got baptized across the street at the Episcopalian Church. I did not, because I'm an agnostic. But the Christmas tree takes so much effort to put up that we sort of feel like, why put it up and leave it up for a month? And like, it's such a nice piece of decoration. And to be honest, it's such a pain to put away.
I agree. I agree with. I'm nodding along here because this is all true. And so you leave it up.
My wife does a really good job with
Yeah,
decorating.
look at that tree. Yeah, it's really.
My wife Elaine does a really good job with decorating the trees.
Yeah, I'm looking, trying to find in the book review section a review. There's an article here about our next week's guest, but I'm having trouble finding it. Neil, would you just put back the description so that I can try to find it here?
What is the name of your next week?
Yeah, so Neil's going to come in and tell us all.
Wait.
Yeah, 1 second.
Now you've done something that you have to stop.
Yep. Yes.
Medgar Evers.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us. Yeah. Tell us
I can
about
honestly
this.
say that I helped jail Medgar Evers' assassin, Byron de la Beckwith.
And thank you for that.
I
What an
helped.
incredible.
I
Yeah.
wasn't
No.
the
Of
only
course.
one.
Of course. No. But let's hear that story. Let's go a little longer if you have the time. Just tell us about that. What an horrifying chapter in American history. And this book is The Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved cases of the civil rights era, including
You can keep showing that. You can't show my study. It's too special.
Okay.
I want to show you something. That,
all right. Folks, thank you for watching. We're just so happy to have you all here. And please post your comments. Page 11 of the book review, I was looking for Lily Copeland, and here she is. Next week's guest is Lily Copeland, and here is her book being reviewed in the New York Times. Before you spit in that vial, what are the ramifications of consumer genetic testing? The Lost Family, How DNA Testing is Upending Who We Are, by Lily Copeland, and she's next week's guest. We're so excited to have her. And this is Pam Belloch's review. And to connect it all, Mr. Ti-Hua Chang studied genetics in part, right, at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's my degree, my biology degree. I focused on those population genetics.
And it's Libby Copeland who'll be joining us. Yeah. Very, very cool. Yeah.
So going back,
one
of the awards I had in my closet, this is one of them. It's for Who Killed Medgar Evers when I was at the ABC News. And
Primetime Live.
Wow. We did a magazine piece, 2 magazine pieces actually. And what happened was, I'll tell you what's interesting about this is that, excuse me. So in, I guess it was 1990, my boss at Primetime Live, Ira Rosen, who's now at 60 Minutes, was looking for me something for me to do, a story to do. And he said, I didn't have one yet. And he said, he ripped out this little piece that said that the investigation to Medgar Evers' assassination had ended in Hinds County, Mississippi, and that it would not proceed anymore because there wasn't enough evidence. He said, go do that story. Basically, that no one would be ever convicted of Medgar Evers' assassination.
For those watching who don't know Medgar Evers, just a little background.
Medgar Evers was a civil rights leader. He was the head of the NAACP in Mississippi, back in the deep segregation days. And he was assassinated in June of 1963. Excuse me. He was shot from behind, from 100 yards away. Oh, that's my wife saying goodbye. Excuse me. So I went down to Jackson, Mississippi, and basically do the story that no one would ever be convicted and sent to jail or prison for the assassination of Medgar Evers. And while I was there, I ended up going to, I had been sorry, I had been a crime reporter in Detroit. And in Detroit at the time, they felt that the media was very, quote unquote, pro-white and anti-black. So they wouldn't give you any information. I ended up having to become an investigator myself. I went to a bookstore, a federal bookstore, and got this little book that how to be a crime investigator. And, you know, like checking when there are break-ins, look for broken panels of glass and paint, and how to do an H pattern when you interview people in a neighborhood. So anyway, I went down there and I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to retrace the steps that are 25, 27 years old? And I thought, okay, what would I do if I were the killer? How would I kill Medgar Evers? And I thought I would go to the last public place that he went to, follow him home, and then shoot him. Well, I had a copy from his widow, Merle Evers Williams. I had a copy. She gave me, which I still have, a carbon copy transcript of the second trial of Byron de la Beckwith, in which a all-white jury found they had a hung jury, and so he went free twice. The evidence was overwhelming against them, but because it was segregation in the South, the all-white jury could not decide to convict him. So I got a copy of the transcript, and I read that he had gone to this one particular church. So I went to that church in hopes of trying to retrace his steps and see what I could find. And it was this Baptist church. And apparently there's a Southern Baptist tradition. If you're a guest in a church, and there weren't a lot of people there, it was a dying church, I guess, at the time. And they asked me to stand up and speak. And you know, normally as a journalist, you don't get involved like that. But I thought, you know, it's like, these were such sincere, nice people. And all they were asking me to do was stand up and say who I was. And I thought, out of respect to the people there, I would stand up and say who I was. And I got up and I said, I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter from ABC News. And I've covered many stories. I've covered thousands of stories. And there are always two sides. I said, except in this one. In this one, there's only one side. That's the right side. And that's Medgar's side. And I don't know why I said that. Maybe it's because I was an activist in college. I was anti-Vietnam War. And just standing up in front of an audience, somehow it just came out of me. And somebody said, amen. And after someone said amen, I just started talking some more about why it was important to find the killer of Medgar Evers. And I guess I just kept on going on and on. I didn't stop. And there were more amens and more amens after that. And I had already been there for a week. And then, and I had talked to a number of people who were community leaders who refused to give me any information. And after I spoke, one of the community leaders came up to me and said, I saw Medgar's killer here the day he was assassinated, the night he was assassinated. And this person had never revealed this before. And he had not revealed it to the police, obviously, who were, also Klans members. He had not revealed it to the FBI. He had not revealed it to any federal investigator. He also had not revealed it to Andy Rooney, who had tried to do the story a decade before me. And what happened was the people said they trusted me because of what I had said. Because I had said, there are always two sides of the story, except in this case, there's one side, the right side, Medgar's side. So people 4 different witnesses came up to me and said, yes, we saw Byron de la Beckwith in this church at 9:30, just an hour and a half before Medgar was assassinated at 11. And there's no way that Byron de la Beckwith, who said he was in Greenwood, Mississippi, which was 90 miles away, he could have driven and come back. He could have been in Greenwood in time. He could not have driven there. So what happened was I was able to get the 4 witnesses. And because of the national spotlight of national TV, and Diane Sawyer calling up Ed Peters, the Hinds County prosecutor, and going, Ed, what are you going to do? Mr. Peters, what are you going to do about this case now that we found 4 witnesses who say that they saw Byron de la Beckwith at the church where Medgar Evers was? And the combination of 4 witnesses, meaning there's new evidence, and you have this national spotlight. The Hinds County prosecutor said there's no new evidence to bring this case up. And just to backtrack a little, Jerry Mitchell from the Clarion Ledger had gotten some classified information that said that a Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission, which was actually a government organization, was helping the defense. So they said there's a conflict of interest. They should reopen the case. And Ed Peters, the Hinds County prosecutor in Mississippi, said that's not enough. That's not sufficient to reopen the case. But once we came down and found 4 new witnesses and the national spotlight, and Diane Sawyer calling up, it's like someone from Mount Olympus calling, they reopened the case. And Bobby DeLauder, the assistant district attorney, actually pursued this case. And even though, it was something that was not really popular for him to do, he's white and he pursued this case, Bobby DeLauder. He had some issues later that had nothing to do with that. But so that helped open this case up. And I'm very proud. And I can honestly say, had I not done that story, Byron de la Beckwith would have died a free man instead of dying in prison where he belonged. And if you don't believe me, you can call up Jerry Mitchell in Mississippi and ask him if this is true, because he started the whole thing. And Mrs. Merle Evers Williams, the widow, she also helped me give me some of that transcript and information and pursuing the story. So I think all 3 of us can honestly say that we helped bring Byron de la Beckwith to justice.
Thank you
Very
for
long
that
story.
No, but thank you. And Therese says you're giving me chills with this inspirational story. Thank you, Ti-Hua Chang.
Thank you, Therese.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to read this award, the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists, 1991 Journalism Award for Outstanding Coverage of the Black Condition. Ti-Hua Chang and Jay Shadler, ABC News Primetime Live, who killed Medgar Evers. And there's a quote here from Frederick Douglass, unusual to see it in an award. It says, "No man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at least finding the other end fastened about his neck." And I'm hearing good things about Frederick Douglass. More and more people are talking about him. That's a reference to President Trump, who didn't know that Frederick Douglass was no longer with us. So that tells you something about the president. I also want to point out, in addition to having next week's guest in the New York Times Book Review, Libby Copeland, who's going to be here who's going to be on our show next week, the cover story is a review of James McBride, who is a fellow Columbia J School grad, like both of us. We're very proud of him. He wrote The Color. Yeah, one second, just to finish. Color of Water and The Good Lord Bird are incredible books that James McBride wrote. And there's a nice photo of James in here. And if you haven't read it, especially for those, so this is his new book is called Deacon King Kong. But James is an incredible writer, and I'm so proud that he went to Columbia Journalism School. And his new book is called Deacon King Kong. But his most famous books are the beautifully written, beloved memoir, The Color of Water, and the national award-winning novel, The Good Lord Bird. Now, you want to say something about Frederick Douglass? Let's stand as we head towards here, and you're going to tell us about Frederick Douglass. No, but tell us about Frederick Douglass.
My best friend, who is now since deceased, was a Vietnam War veteran, 101st Airborne, Larry Newsom. And he told me a very interesting story. He was very well read. He was a automobile mechanic, but he's a brilliant person. And he said to me that Frederick Douglass had said that, and he quoted this. He said,
"I'm going to just get the light, or we'll move you around."
Yeah,
there you go.
Oh, more light.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. And the Christmas tree.
I know when there's light behind me, my head disappears because I don't have enough hair. But anyway, he said that Frederick Douglass noted that during the slavery period, that the slave owners during Christmas time, from Christmas to New Year's, would give the slaves everything they did not have the rest of the year. That included alcohol, musical instruments, meat, and open sex parties, wild parties. And any slave that did not participate was immediately sold, because they realized that that slave was smart enough to realize what was going on, that they were basically giving the slaves a steam release valve so they would endure the hardships of the rest of the year. Wow. I know Larry told me that story about Frederick Douglass. I never forgot that. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I avoid wine, women, and song. I avoid drugs and alcohol and all that, is that I think those are ways that, you can, those are the things that can destroy your life and destroy society. And you can include in that gambling. You can include in that also frankly, social media, if that's all you do all the time. Because I
Thanks a lot, Ti-Hua.
but I find myself going on social media, and I'll be like on Twitter and this and that, and all of a sudden I look up and it's an hour and a half
It's
later.
a great time sink. That's true.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, next.
That doesn't include Sree.
Yeah, yeah,
He
exactly.
does the New York Times.
That's right.
I haven't
Look at
looked the New York
look
Times in years.
look at the devastation we've caused here. So before we go, we want
Do I
to.
get to keep the time?
Yeah, sure. You can have it. You can have it. No, but a couple of things. Tell us a little more about your dad. We just want to just a couple of quick. Yeah, just finish the story. So we left him. We left him having decimated a Russian colonel or captain in a drinking contest,
Right.
and then how does he end up in America? All of that.
Okay, so my father was a journalist, a lawyer turned journalist in China during World War II, and went from Burma campaign to the Korean Peninsula campaign. He ended up in Japan. He was actually on, I think it was the USS Missouri when the Japanese surrendered. If you look at a picture there, and he's got a document with his name. If you look at the picture, some of the pictures, you'll see somebody sitting on the upper levels with a typewriter in his lap. That's my dad. He had a typewriter. He taught himself enough English to use an English typewriter. And I still have that typewriter. It's a Remington. And then, my dad was ended up as the vice president of the Foreign Press Club. And then what happened in 1949 after the revolution, as I said earlier, that because he criticized the Kuomintang and had praised American capitalism, he couldn't go to Taiwan or to China. So he applied to Columbia, and he got into graduate school at Columbia for political science. And what's interesting at that time, you have to be aware that there were the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was started in 1882, excluded all Chinese. Even the Chinese built the Transcontinental Railroad, built the U.S. economy in the West. That lasted in reality legally until 1943, but they only lifted it to 100 persons. So the Chinese Exclusion Act in reality lasted from 1882 to June of 1968. That's how long, like 86 years in reality. And then after that, the Hart-Celler Immigration Act changed it to allow 20,000 persons from every country into the U.S. I met the person who wrote that act. Robert F. Kennedy actually got him to do that.
Indians also came because of that act. Yeah.
And so what happened is that changed the whole makeup of America. And that's what Trump is trying to change, I believe, trying to go back against that and change the immigration laws. So he's trying to basically remove the people of color in this country, or reduce the numbers, however, something like that. But so my father got into Columbia as one of the only 100 Chinese allowed per year into the U.S. because he was so well known. And so he went to Columbia, but my father was never able to master English because he got to this country at the age of 38 already. And so because of that, he was never able to become a lawyer, couldn't renew his job as a journalist. He became a librarian. And he ended up being a librarian at a private school so that his two sons could have a private school education. And
where was this?
Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School.
Oh, yeah.
And so I grew up with very wealthy kids and felt very ostracized as essentially a servant's kid almost. But I got a good education. So, and that was due to my father. But I'll tell you two last interesting stories about my dad. So during this time, my dad, who had been famous, was no longer famous, was an unknown. He had done the last interview with Tojo, who was the war minister for Japan. He did the last interview with him, and he had written an English story. The New York Times asked him for that story on the anniversary of the surrender of Japan. He refused to do that because he said at the time, China and Japan were trying to build more trade. And he said it would be bad for China, and he wouldn't do it. Here was a person who had been famous, being offered fame again, but he had enough of a conscience and morality. He had a lot of morality that he wouldn't do it. And one last thing was my dad, because he was in Hiroshima, when he was 77, developed rheumatoid arthritis, which destroyed his life in terms of his health.
Because he was there a month after
Yes,
Hiroshima.
and
Yeah.
they believe here in the U.S., the U.S. doctors believe, because the rheumatoid arthritis he had is very rare for someone who's Chinese. And the doctors believe that he got that because of the radiation exposure at Hiroshima, because he should not have gone there. It was 1 month after the bombing, and they believe that he got a large dose of radiation poisoning that only showed up almost 45 years later. And some people like to say that explains why I'm so strange, that because, of the radiation poisoning my dad got. But my dad did live to 92.
God
So he lived a
bless.
long life, but his last 15 years were in misery because of the rheumatoid arthritis.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So,
One thing I've always wondered is that some Indian Americans who have complicated Indian names point to East Asians having slightly easier time with their names because many of them have Western first names to go with their Chinese last names. What was it like to grow up Ti-Hua, which is not an easy name? I don't think any of us who live in America know another Ti-Hua. And your brother's name is?
Ti-Hua.
So did you not have a other name, or was it a political thing? Tell us. Yeah.
I didn't set this up, but this is a great transition. When I was 3 years old, my older brother, my brother's 4 years older, came home from school from PS 165, and he said, they changed my name. And my parents said, what do you mean they changed your name? He said, I can't use my name Ti-Hua anymore. At that time, immigrant kids with quote unquote non-Christian names, their names were changed to a quote unquote Christian name. So my brother said, they say I have to use the name Howard from now on. And I remember going, Howard? No offense to anybody named Howard, but I started running around my brother going, Howard the coward, Howard the coward. What a stupid name. And he's changed, but they were all very upset. Fast forward 4 years later, I'm at PS 165. Same second grade teacher looks at me and goes, Ti-Hua, we're going to call you. And I said, you're not calling me anything. Because for 4 years, all I could think about, what stupid name are they going to give me that begins with T? And I couldn't think of anything. And when she said, we're going to give you the name, I said, you're not giving me anything. I'm keeping my name Ti-Hua. And she went, oh, excuse me. I said, you're excused, but I'm keeping my name. So
what grade was this?
Second grade.
Oh my
I'm
God.
7 years old. And she's like this, and I'm looking up, and I'm keeping my, because all I can think is they're going to give me a name like Howard. And so she looked at me and said, well, and then stormed off. I kept my name. The only problem was I was put on the discipline track immediately after that and dropped a couple of grades in school.
Oh my God.
But my name has been, and then if I'll say one thing. When I graduated from Columbia Journalism School, I could not get a job. And my same older brother said to me, oh, they're looking at your name. They probably think you can't speak English. So I said, okay. So I put under my photo, I said, born in the U.S. I know I wrote U.S. citizen. He said, oh, they not only think you just got naturalized and you have an accent. So I put born in New York City. Still didn't make a change. I still Ti-Hua Chang. So then I changed my name to T.H. Chang. And I got my first job in Biloxi, Mississippi. After working in Biloxi for 7 months, another reporter, an African-American reporter, Nick Jones, said to me, TH, what does TH stand for? I said, well, it stands for Ti-Hua. And he goes, well, why don't you use that? I said, well, because I'm in the South and everyone's an initial. And plus, what difference does it make anyway? And he looked at me and said, well, it might have made a difference to all those Vietnamese kids in New Orleans, because we were in Biloxi, Mississippi. It was near New Orleans. And I looked at him and I said, F you, the full term to him. I said, but you're right. And after that, I changed my name back to Ti-Hua Chang, Ti-Hua Chang. And I remember the first job I had after that was in Philadelphia. And I remember an immigrant couple came up to me and they looked at me and they said, we want to thank you for using your name, because our children would never use their Chinese name until they saw you on TV using your Chinese name.
Oh.
And I said to them, and every market I've ever worked in after that, every single market, people have come up to me and said that. And the funny thing about it is when, because my name is difficult for most Americans because it's unusual, it becomes like a mnemonic. So people never forget it. So to this day, I still get people on the subway going, Ti-Hua Chang, I can say your name. I said, yes. Hi.
What a great story. I don't want to let you go without showing us some of your awards, but also no, but we want to show the Peabody speech, a little bit of your Peabody speech. But more importantly, I want people to hear the story you tell, which is really important, about being an Asian male reporter on television was really hard. That wasn't easy, not because of your name, but because of how you looked. So talk about that. What a news director once told you, discouraging you from becoming a journalist.
There's actually someone higher up. There was someone that Al Idelson, who was at ABC News at the time, was my mentor. He actually helped me get my first job in Mississippi and stuff. So, why are you getting that close, Sree?
This is 60 Minutes. We're going in as you're speaking.
You're going to crack the lens.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what happened was I had worked in Biloxi, then I got a job in Philadelphia, and then I was unemployed for more than a year. And I called up Al, and I said, Al, should I quit journalism? And, my parents still want me to try and go to law school or something.
Be a doctor?
Well, doctor was probably out of the question, but law school was a possibility. And then, like typical, immigrant family, they want you to have a stable job, not something in TV news. And Al was, as my mentor, I asked him, what should I do? Should I quit? And Al said to me something I will never forget. He said, no, you should not quit journalism. You're a good reporter. He said, you're not getting jobs because you're an Asian male. And I was like, huh? And I thought he was going to say it's because you're too much of Mr. Journalism. You're not good enough in corporate politics or something like that. But what he said was that, to get a job in television news, you have an audition reel that shows your video. He says, when I put on the video of an Asian woman, he said, Al said, I feel good. I see a pretty woman. I think of a geisha. I think of a China doll, an acquiescent female. And I feel very comfortable. He said, when I see an Asian male, he said, my neck gets tense. My stomach feels queasy because I think of a karate expert, a Japanese Yankee Udai soldier, or a Chinese laundryman. And he said, and that's why you're not getting work. And I thought, oh my God. And this is something, what Al said to me, no one would ever say to me publicly. But Al was telling me what was really going on the minds of the primarily white men who were deciding whether I would have a job. I did get jobs from women later, and also some great white males too, who were mentors as well, like Al is. And so when he said that to me, I remember thinking, well, there's nothing I can do about that, because I'm a guy. I can't change that. And I remember all day thinking, wow, what do I do? And over the years, in the beginning of my career, I felt as if I was banging my head against a brick wall, because it was so hard to get work as an Asian male. And I think we're pretty much the bottom of the totem pole it's the list of people in terms of priority of those who are desirable in television news. And I'll just say this, it's very funny about the same stereotype that hurts an Asian male in TV news. It has the opposite effect in business. So that Asian men being thought of as sneaky is okay in business. But for Asian women, that same stereotype of being weak and acquiescent, it hurts them in business. So the same stereotype in one field has the opposite effect in another. And I would just have to say that anybody who has that stereotype doesn't know any real Asian women, because it's just not true.
You're married to one, so you know.
Yes.
You know. So we're going to play just very quickly the story of the Peabody Award acceptance speech, because it was such a good speech. So Neil's going to play that, and then we're going to start slowly ending the show. So let's go to that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, here's my Ti-Hua Chang. We're on an extra long episode. I want you to go back into this video and watch the end of the comments, how many people are so grateful for your story. So
sure.
Let's see here. So this is just 2 minutes. Yeah, well, no, this is...
And now a powerful series tracing police investigations of suspected killers who flee to the Dominican Republic, where they are shielded from justice by extradition laws and corruption.
Though Alegria brags on television about how well he races motorcycles, his biggest race, running from police, took place almost exactly a year before this one. On September 22nd, 1993, here in Washington Heights, police charged Alegria was in the lobby of this apartment building on 168th Street. Home to many honest, hard-working Dominican-American families, it was also a building plagued by a handful of drug dealers. Police charged Alegria was in the lobby in his duties as a local drug dealer, controlling this lobby, when he decided for whatever reason to play a game of Russian roulette with people. He took his 9mm pistol, and grabbed people and put the gun to their head, said, "Bang, you're dead," just to scare them. He walked up to 12-year-old Giovanni Santiago. Police records indicate he put the gun to the boy's head. This time the gun went off, killing Giovanni instantly. Before detectives could catch him, sources say Alegria was on the very next commercial flight from Kennedy International Airport bound for the Dominican Republic. He had taken a too common escape route for Dominican criminals wanted for murder in New York, a plane to the Dominican Republic, where he now lives openly.
And here to accept reporter-producer, and we knew him when at prime time, Ti-Hua Chang.
Thank you, Diane. Never thought I'd been one of these. When asking my bosses for 10 times the usual amount of time to broadcast a story, I said there's only a few times in our careers that we do a story that makes a difference. This was one of those times. Because my bosses at WNBC TV agreed, some accused child killers are now in prison. Based on the awards tonight at the Peabodys, too often commercial television stations pursue ratings and not journalism. And TV reporters themselves seek stardom and not being a voice of the people. I'm not a star, but I thank the Peabodys for reaffirming that I am a good journalist. Thank you.
That was great, Ti-Hua. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, folks can hear us. Not getting any response from Sree and Ti-Hua, so I'm not sure what happened with their audio. I think there might be. There we go. Sree.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was a great show. So I'm not sure. Sree, can you hear me now? I think we're having a little problem with Sree.
I can't hear you, so we're going to say goodbye. We can't hear
Steve, you can hear me, right? So everyone else can hear me. Everyone else can hear me. So I'm going to do. Thank you, Ti-Hua.
Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Oh, you can hear. Okay, so let him say goodbye, and then you take the show away. Okay. So Ti-Hua, thank you so much for being with us here today, letting us into your beautiful home, and for being such a great journalist and for sharing the stories of yourself and your family. I know people enjoyed the show. I want you to go back and look at these comments from around the world, people posting. And our friend Diana says, you should write a book about your dad. She will buy a copy. So you'll sell at least one copy. So I know you'll sell so many. And thank you so much for being with us. Yeah, let's do. Or we do namaste. Or we do namaste. Namaste. Yeah, which is the best way to do it. And Doug Levy says, beautiful. These are people watching in California, so early in the morning.
You know, my wife is a yoga instructor.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's great. So, all right, let's say goodbye, and Neil's going to take it away. Bye.
Thank you, Sree. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this week's New York Times Read Along. Our guest today was Ti-Hua Chang, investigative journalist from New York, who is just announced on the show that he's joining the Young Turks, which is really great. I actually remember watching Ti-Hua on WNBC when I grew up in New York many years ago. So it was great to have him on the show. I want to take a moment to talk about our next guest for next week. I will be guest hosting next week's show, and I am incredibly proud to say that Libby Copeland, author of The Lost Family, will be our guest. We will be live at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and LinkedIn. Libby is, among other things, a former journalist for the Washington Post, and I wanted to share a little bit about her book because it's a great book. It just came out this week. It's called The Lost Family, how DNA testing is upending who we are. Her book is really focused on the rise of DNA kits, Ancestry and Me, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, etc., and often the surprises that people get when they do these tests. We shared her book review was in the New York Times this week, and it would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm incredibly proud of Libby because she's a high school classmate of mine from Hastings High School in New York. And I got to see her last night at a book reading here in Washington, D.C. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And wanted to share a couple of more comments that have come in the last few minutes from Willie Henderson, Therese Steiner. What a great New York Times read along. Rose saying that the show was fascinating, and Susan as well. Looking forward to social media weekend. And I just want to reiterate what Sree started with at the top of the show in case folks missed it. And if you're watching now, we're watching the coronavirus updates very closely from the CDC and from the New York City Department of Health. We will be checking in with our colleagues at Pace University and Muckrack, who is sponsoring our Friday reception tomorrow. And we hope to have an update soon about social media weekend. So please stay tuned. And Therese was also asking if I was ready for opening day. I think she's referring to the Yankees hat. Absolutely, Therese. As far as I'm concerned, there are only 2 seasons on the calendar: baseball season and waiting for baseball season. So with that, again, thank you for joining us. Look to see you next week, March 15th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And what a fascinating show with Ti-Hua Chang. Please share this episode and come back and leave comments if you're watching later. Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.